So moving into the agenda, because we have a lot to do today, we're going to just say hello really quick. We kind of did that already. We're going to have about 10 minutes to reconnect with our colleagues, talk a little bit about maybe where we're coming from in the first half of the school year into the second half, and just get back together with the things we're experiencing. We're going to explore the idea of hard to reach families and kind of unpack what that term means a little bit, and talk a little bit about how we can continue to advance our work so that reaches all families. And then we're going to have a panel discussion for the majority of the session. I'm really excited about this panel discussion. Um, we have three people that are both um, parents and then also professionals working with very diverse populations in our state and communities, and they'll be answering some questions, having a conversation, and hopefully having some time to have a little bit of a discussion with you all as well. And then we'll just adjourn at the end. Hopefully you take the exit ticket so you can keep making these meetings as good as possible. But that is already enough of me talking, I think. So what we are going to do here is get into some breakout rooms in a second. And we're going to have about 10 minutes in each breakout room to discuss the following. What is a family engagement strategy that you implemented in the first semester that you're going to continue in the second semester? If you could follow up with that, if you made any adjustments or reviewed any data that might shift the practice into this next part of the year, or share your goal for the strategy, what you're trying to accomplish, that'd be cool too. If none of this applies to you, if you just want to share something that you're working on, or a challenge that you're facing, or anything kind of related to family engagement practice, feel free to jump in there and share. We're going to get to say hello, say Happy New Year, and give each other a little bit of support to start. As Hadley mentioned earlier, we are a community, or trying to build some community here. So if at any time, feel free to use the chat feature. But if you're in a place where it's comfortable and makes sense to use your camera and microphone, that helps build some camaraderie sometimes. So feel free to do that. I am wondering, just so we might be able to get some things on the table in front of the whole group, did anything strike a nerve in your small groups? Did anything kind of dominate the conversation or generate any thoughts, feelings, or ideas that you'd like to share?
Thomas, I'll share. I'm Natalie. I'm new to my position in Southwestern City Schools as of the end of July.
Okay.
And part of what was happening with my role, I'm the state and federal programs coordinator. So I work with federal grants, which includes parent engagement, community engagement activities. And, because of COVID, it's just been, all you could do to try to figure out what it is you need to do and how to do it differently. And one of the reasons I'm here today is to learn more about how I can develop some new family engagement strategies within our district. But in talking with Tammy, Kelsey, and Lorraine, I had a little bit of an epiphany. I knew what the district was doing prior to COVID, and I knew that the way we were doing those things couldn't continue because of COVID. But now that I'm kind of catching my breath and really have the bulk of my job figured out and have a routine and a cadence of productivity and progress, I'm looking now at the things that people are used to seeing and having, and seeing how I might turn those into virtual events. So everybody's used to hearing that we're having a snack and chat session at such and such school. All parents are invited, K-8 or whatever. How can we make that a virtual event and you bring your own snack? So like typically it was a snack that everybody kind of shared, and it was a nutritional exercise and as well as a literacy exercise. But if it could be something that where people can maybe come and pick up, maybe we can purchase the materials and you register in advance like you're used to doing, and then come by and pick up your materials for that night, and I just got to that.
Mhm, mhm.
So I'm here to learn, but that was really helpful to me, um, to be able to think through that based on some of the things that my colleagues were sharing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think that's like such a good point that there might have been things that were working or things family were used to having around that can just be shifted into a virtual environment. And I love where your head's at about trying to make sure everyone has all the resources they need to have kind of a similar enriching experience as they would if they came in. Is anyone I see some things coming in on the chat that I'll mention in a second. I'm just wondering, to follow up on this comment, if anyone out there has had success transforming some things to online. I know that we've had reports that, we've always said you can do parent teacher conferences, uh, uh, IEP meetings virtually, but now people are doing it and it works a little bit. So beyond kind of those general meetings, are people finding other kind of virtual spaces rewarding?
Thomas, one of the things that we did at our center, we're a before and after school program, as well as a childcare center, and we've always had a family movie night. So instead of doing our family movie night where everyone could get together, we did where our families could come to our center, pick up their popcorn, pick up their cotton candy, pick up their snacks, and go home and have a movie as a family. And one of the things we did with that is we had our staff come and set up around the parking lot because our families are not seeing our teachers. They're not being allowed to come into our building and do that kind of thing. So we had our teachers come and set up around the parking lot at their vehicles, and then just kind of wave to the kids and maybe talk through the window and those kind of things to the families so they can make that personal connection with that staff.
Oh, thanks. Great
We had,
idea.
it was a huge success.
Yeah, Tom, let me just add, thank you first of all for sharing that. That's a great idea. We've done something very similar around movies here in Shaker Heights, and families love that. But as it relates to virtual learning and sharing with families, what we've done here in Shaker is we have something we call the FACE Academy, which is very similar to a parent university. And this year we took our FACE Academy online.
Nice.
And what we decided to do was use that as an opportunity to help our families understand how to use technology, answer any technology questions that they may have. And then also we're using that virtual opportunity as a way for parents, family members, guardians, and staff to meet the teachers. And so we've had open sessions where it wasn't necessarily a conference; it was more so a chat room, a chat opportunity. So just really utilizing the tools that we have through Zoom, Google Hangouts, or Google Meets, using the tools that we have and bringing people together virtually, but using it to share information. And we've had some pretty good success with that.
Thanks for sharing. I love that idea, because we are going to talk a little bit about potential parent university type situations, and your idea to create that virtually is important. And we also, while it's on my mind, thanks Keith, if you were able to make it to our Family Engagement Leadership Summit back in September, there actually was a session from a school that every year, because they've been using technology for a long time, has a parent university around technology access. So that's such a great example that you bring up, especially in this new time. Um, I do just things coming in on the chat if you haven't seen. So we have a strategy here from Sandra about uh, engaging families around their children. We're going to talk about a little bit later that everyone loves their children. Everyone wants their children to succeed. That's such an easy way to get people motivated and connecting. Um, Also, things coming in about student-led conferences. And because it's a virtual kind of student-led conferences, you can invite grandparents who might not have been able to visit before, and it gets to be a little more supportive, which is really great and continues this extension of home to school learning. A lot of people agreeing with people about things that have been shared. Ooh, math games. I'm an elementary math school teacher, so I love that. Demoing math games for the math program. Love the curriculum nights coming in. So feel free to keep looking through the chats and also keep dropping your ideas in the chat. But I did want to hang on just for a second and ask if people, maybe unrelated to this big idea thinking, if anyone had announcements for things that they were either thinking about or that they're excited about, or events that they might be attending that are going to advance family engagement, practice, or understanding.
Tom, I can share something with the group. All right, so one of our strategic plans is around working with our most marginalized families and our most vulnerable families. And so here in Shaker Heights, typically, even though we have a pretty large international population, that's pretty much our Black and Latino families. And so what we're doing here in Shaker for the remainder of the year is we're going to move the needle from starting with Black history. And we're going to use Black history as a leveraging tool for literacy. And we're calling it Black History Promotes Literacy. And so when you look at the data in most school districts across our country will show that as far as it relates to literacy, including math, score-wise, African-American students and Latino students, their scores are pretty much lower than the rest of the population. And so we want to uplift and really use Black history to promote literacy in the sense that we want to highlight it. We really want to highlight it. And we just started we just had an MLK celebration that was absolutely amazing. It was held online through YouTube. We had over almost 600 views from our families. We had about 586 views from our families. The month of February. So every month we have something that's happening for the rest of the school year, but it's all related to and tied to literacy. So we believe in this process of mirror and windows. So if a student can see him or herself in literature, see him or herself in a book, right? Him or herself in a story, then they're more likely to engage in that learning process. As far as the window is concerned, allowing others to look through the window and see where other people come from and see and understand their experiences of life. And so we want to use Black history as that leveraging tool. So that's something I wanted to share with the group. And we're calling it here in Shaker, we're calling it Black History Promotes Literacy.
Thank you, Mr. Langford. That sounds like just awesome. Really post-timely almost, and then also just connecting straight to literacy, which is, such a great mover for students and families. So thank you for sharing that.
And here's the reason why I would say that, Tom, is we have a momentum in our country right now. The light is shining. There's no need to drop what's already moving, right? How do you go from what's happening in our country as a historical moment in time that's totally related to Black history, and then just totally shift away from that into something else non-related? And so use this moment in time as a leverage to engage your most vulnerable or unengaged families and students. Use this time, all right, let me stop. I'm about to start preaching. I'm sorry.
We really appreciate it, though. Great ideas. Other announcements people might want to share?
Yes, I'd like to share about about NASCI.
Okay.
Ambassador for NASCE, the National Association of Family, School, and Community Engagement. And I coordinate the Community of Practice, the COP. It's 1 hour on the first Tuesday of each month. And I wanted to let everyone know that it is available. And this February 2nd, from 2 to 3 Eastern Standard Time, I put it in the chat. Our topic is going to be engaging families at the high school level as a challenge. We have a teacher from the state of Maryland that is going to share what practices she uses to engage families at the high school level. And then we go through to May, and we're going to be talking about family engagement on higher education level. We're going to do family human trafficking with awareness of what we need as teachers and parents to work with that particular topic. And then we're going to end our session for the year with Native American history and how to work with Native American families. And we're finding the way that the Native Americans are working with their families is good for any family. And so that should be an interesting session. So I put my information in the chat for you to reference, and let me know. It is a perk of membership. But if you're not a member, let me know, and we'll be glad to have you sit in on a session and see if you'd like to belong to our group and be able to take advantage of all these opportunities. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, thank you so much. And we definitely love so much of the work that our friends at NAFSC are doing. So feel free, and we encourage you to check out those events as well. I do want to make a quick mention. This is kind of a little further up in the chat at this point, but related to NAFSC, our center is actually pretty closely partnered with NAFSC, and we are working with them to host a reframing institute. And if you don't know about NAFSC's work with the Frameworks Institute, they basically did a bunch of market research on how to effectively talk about family engagement with people that aren't in the field or might not be so familiar with it as a concept. And this institute is kind of an opportunity to hear that research, get to practice a little bit of it, and have an opportunity to shift the way that we're discussing this as professionals and be up to date with the best terminology to share what we do with families and community partners and things like that. So Hadley dropped that link in there, and feel free to visit that and register as well. If there are more announcements coming, please drop them in the chat, and we'll hopefully have some time at the end too. But I do not want to shortchange the great kind of event that we have coming up here in a second. So I'm going to keep things moving. Thank you so much for your participation in this section here. I'm going to shift rapidly, as I just mentioned, and we're going to jump into exploring this idea of hard to reach families. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today comes from the text, the Handbook of School and Family Partnerships. It's a great read for if you're a professional in this field. The one caution I would have is it's pretty expensive. Try to find a used copy if you can, but it's a great read, and you might be able to find some of the articles other places. I have the information to find that book in here today. But before we get too far into things, I want to kick things off with a little poll. So I'm going to launch a poll right now, and it's just 3 questions. Just take about a minute or so to respond. Just take about 10 more seconds. Okie dokie. So if you see the results there, we're kind of mixed on this, and that's great because we're about to have a conversation about it. Something bared out here a little bit, or bore. I'm sorry, I'm not an English guy. I'm just kidding. But something happened here that I was actually kind of hoping for, planning for. It's not as big as we normally see, but there does seem to be kind of a difference in our beliefs about reaching students and reaching families. And that's always kind of interesting to note. Also, I do appreciate this shift in our thinking about using that term hard to reach when we describe families. Because I'm going to ask this question now, and please throw your answers in the chat. When you hear someone say, oh, that's a hard to reach family, or we're having trouble reaching these families, or those families, it's hard to get them here. What does that mean to you? And what is that person kind of trying to describe? If you could just put your thoughts around that really quick in the chat, that'd be helpful. I'm seeing disengaged, a language barrier. Oh, there's like an administrative thing there. Like we have the wrong contact information, basic needs not being met. Lot of stuff. Keep putting those answers in there. Oh, I love some of the answers here are great. You're not using the right strategies. There does seem to be so two things are happening here. First of all, I'm very happy because if I did this a year ago, 2 years ago, I don't think I'd be seeing as many positive responses in this box, which means we're moving in the right direction. But if you see a trend here, you keep seeing things about stigma, barriers, whether it's to do with language, challenges to connect. It's all kind of a negative thing. We're lumping big negative things onto a group of families, and we might not even be sure what we are defining about those things. It's just kind of like a negative type of situation. Just to continue our thought experiment, I'm going to open another poll here, and just take another minute to look at this poll. What if we flip this question? So just take a minute or so to look at these questions. Just about 5 more seconds. Okie dokie. So if you didn't make it, that's okay. Feel free to continue the conversation in the chat. So this is a little split here, but looking at these results, if you flip the question, we might also be in the affirmative that the school's kind of hard to reach in certain situations. And maybe if the school's not itself hard to reach, specific information about what my child should be learning might be challenging to reach. School events and opportunities might not be accessible to everyone in terms of knowing about them and things like that. And we have some pretty steady yeses to these questions. And that is why we are here talking about this today. I now represent to you the idea of hard to reach families as the myth of hard to reach families. And this is not my original idea. This was presented in chapter 15 of the book, Handbook for Families, that I was mentioning and will show again. And basically, hard to reach families are a myth for two reasons. One is directly from that text I'm talking about. One is something we've talked about a lot in this group. Number one, the school can be hard to reach. So is hard to reach families really a thing if you flip the exact question and the other thing's true? There's just a general breakdown in communication sometimes, or we're not communicating the most important things, or it's not accessible to everybody. That could be kind of what's going on here. The other thing that's going on here is that if there are hard to reach families or communication breakdowns or places we're not being as successful, we can address those just like we address student situations in the classroom. You have to identify a skill gap, you can scaffold towards it, and you can set goals and reach them. We talked about MTSS way back in November when Hadley gave a presentation on how the multi-tiered systems of support framework can be applied to include family engagement so that we have a menu of resources available for all different types of families. And so for these two reasons, I'm going to go ahead and agree with the authors that this is basically a myth. And if anything, it just is a challenge that calls on us as professionals to take on. Now, just because I said it's a myth doesn't mean that engaging families isn't challenging from time to time, or might not be something that we need to rethink. In chapter 15 of this book, which I'm going to keep kind of referencing here, we have, excuse me, we have Karen Mapp and Sue Hong present 4 beliefs that we can shift in school staff to get beyond the myth and to advance our practice. And I just want to share those with you and a couple other considerations in our work. So the first kind of thing is pretty straightforward, and being in this group for a while, I feel like we're all kind of here. Like, all parents have dreams for their children and want the best for them. It's very straightforward. It's something to internalize. Families want the best for their children. There's a bunch of research that supports that. It's not just a warm feeling. At the same time, families also have capacity to support their children's learning. Now, do they have the same capacity as like a teacher does to teach per se? Maybe not. But in terms of supporting learning, background, experience, and talents all provide the foundation for families to support their students. Families are experts at being families, and they're experts at being themselves, and we can leverage their experience and skills to build bridges between home and school. Here's a pretty tricky one. We have to view parents and school staff as equal partners. Students are at home most of the time. They're being cared for by their parents. The parents, you know, we've all heard the saying, that's your first teacher, right? Your parents around there. So while educators are professionals and charged with supporting students for the day, there needs to be a view that parents and teachers are equally as supportive and equally adept at supporting their students and their goals. We all know lopsided power dynamics in any situation can create trust and respect issues, which is the crux of this whole thing, right? Lastly, the responsibility for partnership is with schools. So we have to take on that responsibility and see about how we can bridge the gap so that we can kind of rely on each other at some point. But without the trust and without that bridge being built ahead of time, we cannot expect families to just seek us out. A couple of quick strategies to move past these things as well. Thinking about how we define family engagement. Do we have a modern definition, or are we really just focused on things like annual surveys, PTO meetings? There is something I added in the further meeting that is called the Hoover, Dempsey, and Sandler model of family engagement that was constructed at Vanderbilt University. And this model was a real game changer for me, and I hope it will be for you too. It holds that student achievement can be influenced by the student's perception of their parents' ability to engage. So if we're really effective at engaging families around school and in school, students see that and can have like effects from that perception. Um, it also says that students and families can kind of have autonomy in this relationship as well. I added an article that I'll show you in a second to kind of explore that idea further. We talked a little bit about MTSS. Are we fitting this into a positive, or not a positive, a continuous improvement framework? Are we reviewing data? Do we know what the hard to reach is for? Do we, things like that? And then are we addressing it with interventions that match our data as well as family desires? Lastly, and I was glad this came up a couple times in the beginning, we want to leverage parents. One thing we know from research is that parents actually oftentimes get more information about what's going on in school from other parents than they do formal school channels. So is there an opportunity to have parent universities or create parent ambassadors or homeroom help or things that are not just there for, to help the teacher when they have projects and stuff, but can really be a relay of important information, a trusted figure in the community. So for further reading, I offer you the links in the PowerPoint, which is on the website. And then also this article is pulled out on the website as well, is the Handbook of School Family Partnerships. It's a foundational text kind of for the work. It's a good thing to have. But also this article, and it may kind of seem a little out there because it's for school counselors, but this article, why do parents become involved in their children's education, actually applies that Hoover, Dempsey, and Sandler model. So that is a good article to get you started. Also on the website, I have just the model if you wanted to examine it and kind of see how it applies to your own work. Feel free to keep throwing thoughts and ideas in the chat around this. This was a crash course just so we could have a conversation about that and kind of get on the same page, or at least shift thinking a little bit if that was necessary. But also feel free to push back, challenge, and share your own experiences so that we can get to on the same page about advancing this work. So now is the time you've waited for. And I want to give a direction here really quick. We have our lovely panelists here, and they're going to get going in a second. I'm going to ask everyone except the panelists if they could turn off their video right now. And we can turn it back on for some discussion or if you ask a question. But just so our panelists are front and center, please turn off your videos. Okie dokie. Looks like we are all here today. And first of all, I just want to, in advance, thank our panelists for being here today to have a conversation, a candid conversation in front of a bunch of practitioners. Can be a scary thing, definitely a busy time. So thanks for sharing your time and thanks for being here. Kind of the way this is going to work is we have some questions we're going to work through, and I'll try to lead off everyone by saying your name so we don't talk over each other and stuff. But the first thing I think our panelists or that our attendees would like to know from our panelists here is if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and also the perspectives that you're going to bring to this conversation, whether it's just a professional perspective, whether you're a parent and a professional, anything like that. Elaine, would you like to get us started today?
Sure. I'm Elaine Hamilton. Professionally, I work for the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. And today my perspective is going to be from a parent standpoint and a professional. And most of the things that I'll be talking about will have a kind of a special ed interest or students with disabilities interest.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Kevin. How are you today?
I'm good. Glad to be here. My name is Kevin Boehm with Columbus City Schools. I'm the McKinney-Vento Liaison, and our program is called Project Connect. We work and identify with families who are experiencing homelessness or transition, maybe staying in a hotel or in another location that's not adequate, staying doubled up with families and friends. So we identify and work with those families. I'm not a parent yet, but my wife's expecting at the end of February. So it'll be a professional role and from the homeless perspective.
Wow. Well, congratulations and thanks for being here. Jhuma, how are you today?
I am very well. It's nice to see all of you. My name is Jhuma Acharya. I'm a former refugee from Bhutan, came to United States through refugee resettlement program. I work for a refugee resettlement program as well, but at the same time, I am a community representative too. I work with a lot of youth mentorship program my perspective is from community perspective, how immigrant families have hurdles getting access to school, parents getting engaged to school. And also from my personal, I being a dad of a 7-year-old boy, I have my personal experience how families like me and families who cannot speak English have challenges getting engaged with the school.
Thanks so much. And as you all can tell, we're coming from such diverse perspectives today. So we're really looking forward to just have some basic questions about communication that have this unique twist for some of our more diverse populations. So I'm just going to get us started off with a really straightforward question. Just tell me a little bit about your experience with school to home communication, whether as a professional or a family member. Has it been good? Has it been bad sometimes? What are some of the challenges you face in your community? And I'm going to come right back to you, Jhuma. How have you experienced school to home communication?
I have a mixed experience. On my personal level, I have a good experience because of the language that I can speak and communicate with, it has given me a kind of privileged position to connect with the school and say how my child get it, how I as a parent can get it engaged with the school. But with the community perspective, I think the language has been the biggest hurdle. People do not speak the language, so they even don't know what is family engagement. They don't have that sense because I didn't have any experience back home. I was a teacher for a long time, 20 years teaching in a refugee camp. We didn't have parent engagement as such. When a child is being sent to the school, it is school responsibility to guide him and make him through. So coming from that perspective to US family engagement concept to our family is a very new thing, and people don't take that seriously, or they don't understand the concept of family engagement. That is there, but there is a barrier of that language and culture. People like how to go to school, because back home the schools are like they're open door schools. Here schools are all structured. There are natural barriers for the school, things like that. So these are creating more and more barriers. And unless the family understand the situation, it's so hard for them to reach to the school.
Thank you so much for sharing. How about you, Kevin? What is your experience with school to home communication in your position?
Yeah, communication is vital for our position. We work with students and families really on an individual case-by-case basis, when it comes from a referral from a school or a principal or from the shelter. And sometimes families may not have a phone or may not be staying in the same place, and that can be extremely difficult to maintain that. But what we found is being persistent in our role is what is most important. You know, just because you leave a message one time, you got to circle back around and keep them engaged by letting them know that you're there to provide that support. So, you know, for us, traditionally, it was, you know, we would send letters, but if the family had moved, that letter's not going to make it, you know, so we have to do home visits and a variety of things. And the pandemic has really shifted some of our communication strategies with technology, using things like Google Voice. That's been pretty effective. Text messaging for some of our unaccompanied youth students, or even some parents are more comfortable texting, and that's been pretty eye-opening, and a good support that we've had to connect with them.
That's awesome. And I love how you kind of mentioned the texting thing at the end, and kind of relation to it. It's the most comfortable form, and that's okay if it's maybe not exactly the same as what we've been working from. Elaine, how about you? What about communication, school to home communication in your experience?
It's been really great, and I'm so thankful for that, because our daughter is very involved due to her disability. She has autism, and she tends to be self-injurious. And then when she's not able to communicate and becomes frustrated, she will sometimes, you know, destroy property, or maybe try to grab some of the staff. So we have to start communicating with the school before we even leave the home sometimes. We had a great team, our bus driver and attendant on the bus. They allowed me to text them if she wasn't doing well, and, you know, maybe my husband and I would decide to take her to school. We would text the teachers and say, you know, she's not doing too well, we're not going to have her ride the bus today, or vice versa. In the middle of the day, the teachers would sometimes text me and say, you know, she's not doing too well, so we think maybe it's best that she doesn't ride the bus. That was part of our behavior plan. So really keeping that plan going, and communicating with the school just about daily, weekly, if not daily, just to make sure that she's able to attend school and you know, get the services that she needs. But on a professional note, I'm hearing everything right now. It's just parents are struggling because, you know, the district may change their plan in the middle of a week. Maybe they might be going hybrid today, and the next thing you know, they're not. So that's an issue. And then another thing that's been coming up, the age of majority for those kiddos that are 18, and the schools having to pivot and start really giving that student ownership of their education, and communicating more with the student. Parents aren't understanding that their role has changed when kiddos get to be that age. So that's a big thing that I'm hearing lately.
Thanks for sharing. I want to follow up really quick with you though, Elaine, because you mentioned that communication with your daughter and her school has been really good mostly. Can you follow up just with, like, was it always like that? How did you kind of get to the point where everyone was kind of on a team?
I kind of have always been that type of parent. Like, even with, I have an older child who's older than her. When he was in school, I'd made sure to join the PTA, just so I would have my foot in the door to kind of have my finger on the pulse of what's going on. So it's always been good. There's been some times when I've had to bring the team to the table where certain members of the team, maybe they weren't respectful to me as a parent. And I had to, you know, pretty much follow up with somebody above them to kind of get that situation resolved. And it didn't make me feel good, or as a team member of the team, I didn't feel like I was a partner. So there's different forms of communication. Yeah, they're calling me, they're texting me, but the way they make me feel as a partner, that type of communication has not always been the best. But I would say there's more positive than negative, but we know how that goes with negative information seems to circulate faster than positive information. So if I would say this school did this or that, I'm really talking about one or two individuals. I'm not talking about the entire district. Because the district, they're doing the best they can. They're going above and beyond, in my opinion. But there might be a few individuals on that team or in that building that maybe did something that made the parent feel bad.
Thank you for sharing your personal experience. I'm going to ask kind of an interesting question right now. You guys are all positioned in spaces where communication can be like really important between making sure that students are where they should be and not missing days and getting everything that they need to be successful, not just as students, but as human beings. I'm looking to you, Kevin. Can you tell me about a creative solution that your team came up with at some time when things were really urgent?
Yeah, I would say, going back to the Google Voice situation, that has really been a godsend because, being from Columbus City Schools, we are part of the teachers union, my staff, and they're a very strong union. And there's some conflicting information maybe coming out about what accommodations the district should provide and yada, yada. Don't use your personal phone or personal computers. And our team is a pretty dedicated team, pretty dedicated staff. And using Google Voice has been a godsend for us because we can forward our phones directly to home while we were working from home. So we can forward our office phone to our Google Voice. We have also worked with the district to have our Google Voice or even voicemail go to an email. So we can, if we're not actually in the building, that we can connect virtually. But I really think that that use of technology has been integral for us in being able to communicate with our students who are unaccompanied, maybe not staying with their family, and they've been engaging with us through text message and families. That's been the most important thing that I've seen.
That's great to hear, this shift towards technology. And for those who aren't familiar kind of with the functionality of Google Voice, is it preferred because like phone numbers maybe not necessary to use it?
Yeah, it's basically gives you like a third-party phone number, so you're not having to give out your personal phone number, but it keeps all my professional contacts in that one spot. So if a call comes in through Google Voice, I know it's pretty much related to Project Connect or something with Columbus City Schools, or related to work or a family reaching us. So that's been the most helpful thing to have a little bit more access for families.
Thank you. Jhuma, the same question to you. Have you seen a really creative solution or in an urgent situation around some of the communities you work in?
The communities that I work with are not very good in technology. So many of them, they don't use that much. Email is very far away to reach to them. So email, Zoom, these things that doesn't work with most of the families. And the only thing that could do is phone call. But then phone call in English, if the voice message goes in English, it doesn't make any sense to them. So use of technology is very hard, particularly for those generation of people like maybe parents who have never been to school in their entire lifetime will have very hard time even using phones. So that is always hard. So what happens in most of the cases, the kids will speak over the phone. Like if a school calls the parents, and it would be the kid who would be responding the call. Because the parents would not know who is saying and what they're saying. So the kids should be able to understand in English. Sometimes they will tell lie, but many times, yes, it's how the kids will respond, answer the call.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Elaine, and back to you about this question about creative solutions to urgent situations.
Well, a lot of the kids in the district that I live in, since they are not in school, they're not getting the meals that they would normally get during the school day. So I know that our district has really made a point of having a schedule when parents can come in and pick up food. And I think that's great that they're partnering with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank. So I feel like those opportunities are huge, where if there's some type of communication that they need to get to families, they can use those opportunities to connect with families when they're coming in to get that box of food. Or and there was one building that set up a box where they have free books, where kids can come by this building and it's like a mailbox, and they could get in that mailbox and get a free book. So those things are really appreciated. And I think that those things go a long way. And it's another opportunity for the district to go ahead and reach families that way and send information home with them if they can't get them on the phone, or, you know, my daughter's would call every Sunday night with an update of what's going on for the week. And I didn't have to pick the phone up. I could pick it up at another time to listen to the voicemail message so that I could get a handle on what to expect for the week. So I feel like there's all types of different ways that I think they're thinking outside the box as best they can. And I know that a lot of families that speak different languages, I think there's an issue there, because some of the videos and some of the stuff that they're putting online on their website, I don't know that it's in those other languages. So those are the families that, you know, that we're hearing from, they don't know what's going on because the material is not in their language.
Thank you. And that question was important to me and helpful. And we've heard a lot of the things that you've shared, you've all shared in this group, people doing different things, but this is really playing out to me relative to our multi-tier system of supports conversation in the way that what's going to work for everyone is different. You just heard Jhuma talk about like technology is like not gonna be the saving grace for our community. So how are we going to strategize around that information we have to reach people most effectively, even if 80% of people are captured in our main communication delivery? So just making connections between meetings and things. But to keep the conversation going here, we talk a lot about two-way communication. It's in the modern time, or recently, family engagement really must involve having access to the school just as much as schools have access to families. Kevin's talked a little bit about their use of Google Voice and how that's created like a big touch point for families. I'm wondering, and I'll start with Jhuma, if you've seen good practices that schools have taken where families can communicate back to school well, or taken a step to create that other side of communication where schools can get feedback from families in your community.
Yes, absolutely. There are several ways schools are attempting to make this easy for families. Uh, the school district where my son goes to has a staff that calls pretty much all the Nepali speaking staff to pass the information. She translate the voice message into Nepali, and the school can send it to all Nepali speaking families. Even some materials are being printed in Nepali and are put on their website. Those who are able to access the website can access it. If not, then they are also mailing it to them, so that at least those things are reached to the parents. So there are different ways schools are trying, but it's so hard for bigger school district where they have big population. Small school district could manage, but at the same time, the funding things are always there. But schools are trying hard, and some of the schools have their like multi-language staff. They are looking up on staff who can speak multiple languages depending upon what student population they serve. So like even in Columbus School District has language liaisons, a bilingual assistant in the building who would be able to do that, reach out to the families. And things are happening, but I think things are happening in a pace, in a slow manner, but good things are happening. I work with a bunch of Columbus City schools in the north side where I work with a lot of my youth mentors and mentees, and things are happening. They are getting improved every day. Maybe our students are learning English and it becomes more efficient, easy for us and for the family, but things are going on.
Thank you. Kevin, coming back to you and Project Connect, you talked a little bit about Google and expanding your texting program and things. Are there steps that you or your whole Project Connect staff have taken so that families that, you know, need your resources or are entitled to your resources can connect with you?
Absolutely, yeah. again, throughout the pandemic, it sort of forced us to rethink. We were able to get a website with a little bit more online presence at the district level. Even at the district level, we've just been, which is like perfect timing with this webinar too, because we were just reorganized under the Department of Engagement. And so one of the things I talked about in our breakout session at the district level, they do all kinds of, communication strategies to stay in touch with families. They have an auto dialer to call the families. They send out letters. And then just before the Christmas break, we did quite an ambitious endeavor called We Care Wednesday. And the Department of Engagement organized a bunch of volunteers, and they, called, the goal was to call 30,000 families or every, parent in the district that had students in Columbus City Schools. Now, not all of them were reached with a, face-to-face, but when they did reach them, there was an opportunity to delve further if the family needed some more resources. All the volunteers had a list of community resources that they could refer the parent to. And also there was a form that that the volunteer could fill out if they wanted to request more contact with the school or have someone from the school reach out. So that was a pretty ambitious endeavor. And I know that they were still, filtering through data and following up and making sure that the parents who did request follow-up from the school were doing so. So just kind of being aligned with them has really been, a good omen for us to be able to move forward. And they also work with our Department of Communication. So if we need to, tap into some more of that mass communication to families, we're aligned in the right place. So we're excited for that and excited to move forward with that department. And to kind of piggyback on what Jhuma was saying, there are 7 bilingual liaisons that the district has hired, and that's starting to get going. So I know that Spanish, Nepali, Somali Mai, and I'm not positive the other one, but I think it's Kinyarwanda for families from Rwanda. And I'm not sure if there's another language, but those liaisons are integral. If we have difficulty working with the family, they will reach out and do the translating and help us communicate our needs or their needs and our supports to them.
Absolutely. Like you said, kind of a great thing to be situated in that larger unit there to help amplify your efforts. So that's awesome. Elaine, how about your yourself here? What have you seen about or you shared your experience of being able to reach out and you're going to connect with the school, but in your community or in your professional life, have you seen really effective opportunities for families to connect?
I think in the beginning of this situation with COVID, they were sending out surveys to kind of find out what the needs, kind of a needs survey. And then I've seen lately a lot of community conversations on Zoom online. Even the students have been involved, and the students have been able to speak up to voice what their needs are. And then the other, just this past weekend, I saw that our superintendent met with a member of the community, and they did a Facebook Live. And he actually pushed it out if you had any questions for the superintendent that you send them in. So, those are the types of things that I'm seeing. And hopefully I would hope that these things continue even after we're all back face to face, because I think a lot of the stuff that they're doing now could be done. And I think it would support the families a lot, over time.
Yes. Yeah, I think, and yeah, your point's really well taken there. I think that while this has been a harrowing situation for those in schools and rallying together to try to make sure students and families have what they need to be safe and successful, it has also blown open kind of what's possible and what engagement can look like. Not necessarily that they're new ideas, but we actually saw them in practice now, and they're really kind of working for people. And so that's really exciting. I appreciate you providing that insight. So if you were all here for our my little 10-minute spiel about hard to reach families and what kind of we're actually saying when we discuss that sometimes, part of the crux of that issue was around power dynamics between families and school staff, as well as building trust. And I know that literally, well, the reason I asked you all to be here is because you all work in areas where nothing can really be accomplished without building trust. Um, we've talked about the actual kind of like practical communication strategies. I'm wondering if you could just add a little bit of insight and maybe your own philosophy on trust and how you have tried to build that from your positions, and if it's worked well or if it's blown up in your face, or um, yeah. And I think I'm going to start here with Kevin.
Sure. It's kind of funny you say that, because just this morning I did get a referral from a social worker they identified a family at a hotel. So I contacted the family and just tried to explain our services. And I could tell that she was very skeptical, maybe even a little mistrusting at first. Because when I asked her like what hotel room number was she was in, that's where she mentioned something about like not coming to take her kids or anything. And then I had to totally reassure her that, we are just here to support and really to know your educational rights. McKinney-Vento is a federal law, need to know your educational rights. And, when I put it that way, that it's just here to support you, especially, when school does go back into session, to have your address up to date. Transportation, that's going to be a major piece, to keep your kids engaged in school. So once she saw that I was an ally and not someone, from the school or somebody trying to jam her up or to, make things difficult for her, she opened up and let me know. So trust is very vital, and you have to come from the approach that you're there to support. And, I was also speaking to a colleague this morning, and one of the things that she mentioned was about, let's say we work with a family, and then you can, they identify a need, and you can give them, a list of resources. The best, following up with them afterwards is that helps build the trust, not just giving them resources to help them do the legwork, but following up again, seeing how that worked out, because we don't want to give bad referrals or just information to give it, but effective information and really, solve that need. So that was a good point by her. It's like when you do follow up with the family and that they see you're there as an ally, you get that trust and the communication just flows a lot better.
Wow, thanks for sharing. And that's kind of the second time you've brought up the follow-up from kind of your organization's unit and how important that can be. And I think that is something that is a huge takeaway from this. It's easy to write an email back or make the phone call back, but how do we keep following up with our families? Really great.
Absolutely, because there are sometimes we do work with a lot of families, but some families you're just going to have to dive a little deeper, and they'll use a little bit more of your energy or more of your time, and maybe that might be what they need to to move forward, and that's okay. You have to, like I said, be persistent and keep reaching out. Sometimes I do home visits and leave cards, and that'll prompt a response, but staying persistent and on top of it and keep circling back around really helps.
Thank you. Jhuma, how about yourself? In your communities and in your life, how have you seen, or what is your philosophy about trust and building trust? How have you seen it work?
I think I'll go pretty much with what Kevin was saying. I think it's a matter of getting to know, and once you know the family, and if you follow them up, that is ideal. And many times it also depends upon the culture of the family, like particular community. Like if speaking particularly about the large population that I work with are Nepali speaking. So I'm pretty much adapted. I am from the same community, so I have the nuts and bolts of the cultural aspect of the community. So they trust me more than someone who goes from outside community and asks them about. Like I totally agree with Kevin was saying, that when you ask for the address, people would hesitate to give you the address because there are so many fear behind that. There are lots of political news going around, floating around, has made people more vulnerable of sharing their information. And particularly when you're asking about your child, it is hard. But then once you introduce themselves and tell them what is the aspect, what is the perspective that you are trying to develop a relationship with them so that they get advantage of it, it is not easy, but it's a consistent work to do it. We have to build upon. One visit or two visit may not be enough, but a continuous effort to follow them up, and also being very sensitive to the culture what they have. Like for the families that I work with a bunch of families uh, from Kinyarwanda speaking background, and they have different aspects. Like the culture that I utilize, the cultural knowledge that I have of Nepali culture, if I go and try to utilize in Somali community, it doesn't work. So we have to see what fits well in what community. Because in a school, in a setting that we work with, there are so many different groups of people and they speak so different language and they have different cultural background. So we should be very respectful of that. Well, if you respect the culture and they feel that you are respectful of that, I think the development of trust is easy. That's what I have seen in my everyday work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the respect and at least making an attempt to understand culture and where people are coming from. Great insights. And lastly, uh, I'll come to you, Elaine. What's kind of your philosophy and what you've seen work about building trust?
Well, I have the opportunity right now working in 4 counties across the state and have worked in 24 counties across the state out of the 88 counties. So, I mean, if the parent feels they're truly a valued member of the team or partner with the school, I think that's huge. Just today, I had 2 meetings and they were very different. One, the district mentioned to the parent that the team had over 300 students that they were responsible for. So that statement right there made the parent feel as though their student wasn't important or they would get to them or whatever it was. So it didn't really do a lot for their relationship. And then the next meeting, the kiddo had missed 14 meetings with the teacher. And so this district decided to say to the parent, well, what can we do? Can we switch the day when they're meeting or the time when they're meeting? So if you look at the 2 different ways this was handled, one made them feel, wow, they're really wanting to work with us. They want to work with the student. And some of the stuff that the other 2 gentlemen said, you mentioned follow up with families, but follow through was also huge. When you make a commitment to something, make sure that you see that commitment through, because the family's not going to trust you if you make a commitment to do something in a meeting, and then when they get the prior written notice, it says it's very vague, and then there's no follow through on what was decided at that meeting. So follow through, I think, is huge. And then your tone of voice and your body language when you're meeting with families, because those are a couple ways that will definitely cause someone to mistrust you if you're rude or dismissive to a parent. And that it goes both ways, because I think a lot of times if there is a little bit of friction, they have to figure out a way to kind of get it back on track to where we're focused on the student.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. I think you bring up just a great point about, you know, maybe you didn't say this explicitly, but I was getting this sense about, people have all different types of feelings about school, like themselves, not just kind of where their students are coming from. So how are we making sure that as parents or family members, caretakers, they feel like team members and not that they're back in school and that this is going to play out kind of the same way again. So I appreciate that insight. Unfortunately, we are kind of running up against our time now, and I just want to kind of sum up the conversation really quick. I wrote down some takeaways and I kind of wrote down like one from each. And I think some things that I really heard that I want to just echo is just the importance of persistence and consistency, doing what you said you were going to do, and also following up, not giving up. Understanding culture, being aware of culture and approaching that appropriately and with reverence for it, like really taking that seriously. And then also this idea of membership or team membership. We're equals, and that can really flip a power dynamic if person feels like they're part of the team. I want to say again, thank you so much for being here. You guys have been great and shared such awesome perspectives with us. And I'd like to invite also at this time our attendees, if you'd like to turn on your camera and give a wave or a round of applause or just type thanks in the chat. We just want to show our respect and appreciation. So thank you all for talking on this panel today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes. So also, that was a great conversation. It is something that will be shared in our space if you want to revisit it. I think this fits into so much of what we've been talking about very nicely, but this meeting is not what I think. It is about what you think, and what's going to help me know what you're thinking is if you could complete this exit survey. This has information about, or this will gather information about the actual structure of the event today, the things that happened, and how easy and accessible the meeting was for you. It really helps me to make sure this is meaningful to you all. So with that, I will be sending that out in a follow-up too, but if you have a couple minutes now, feel free to do that. I just want to say thank you for being here. This is one of our largest attendances ever, and live attendances. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this group, and thank you for your dedication to families and students.